Alright, boys, 25 June, straight up 6 o'clock, 25 June, 60 degrees. This is going to be one of the hottest days we've had here in a while. Humidity must be low to have a temperature that low this morning. And for it to get that hot, but that's what you got to have here is low humidity. I shot this gun 2 times at 50 yards. The gun wasn't charged. All it did was lay in the house all night. I aimed at the crosses on this target over here at 50 yards. Little to no wind, just to see what it did. Alright. I did this yesterday too. I'll take you over here and show you the 2 shots I shot at a laser 50. 25.39 grain JSB knocked out 217. Diameter 958 feet a second. That's what it chronographs. Now the way I've got this gun zeroed when I shot it, it's just a smidge high. About a pellet width high at 50 yards. Alright, we've arrived at the target. See that hole in the center of the camera? See that hole right there? That's the 2 shots that were shot this morning, boys. Alright. Now, what I noticed about this gun, if you shoot it after you charge it, it wants to shoot left the first shot. It's probably a good idea to dry fire it after you charge it once, but that's the tendency I've seen. A little high and left at 50 yards. Alright. I've not shot this gun with this slug on paper, but let me tell you something, boys. 3 shots at triple digit yardage, 100, 101, 103 on the laser. I connected well with every shot. Okay, little to no wind blowing. I may shoot it on paper eventually, but I don't really want to touch that gun right now based on what my experiences. Looking at it at 50 and 60 and what happened at 100, 101, 103 yards. And boys, it pops when she hits too. That's all I can tell you. I'm going to turn this camera back on and talk about something else too. I've got the cheek piece off of that gun, and I'm running a set of Vortex rings, 30mm, that are 1 inch, the 1 inch tall. 1.00 is what it says on the rings. I have to have the cheek piece off to run those rings. That's got my scope about 2.42 inches, center of the scope above the center of the bore, best I can measure. Alright, and using that Element Ballistics app, dialing that scope on those 3 triple digit yardage shots, boys, seem to work pretty good. Now, why am I bringing this up? I can run, I've got 2 sets of them, Vortex 1.25 inch rings that I can put on that gun. Alright, and put the cheek piece back on and use it. But here's the problem, and this will give you folks something to think about if you'll study on that Element Ballistics app. Go in there and dial you some, even with a 22 rifle, this is going to apply, okay, whether you like it or not. When you go in there and you start dialing in zero distance, like 30 yards, 35, 40, 45. Now remember what I said about my scope height. Currently it's at 2.42 inches. So if I add these rings that I have, these higher Vortex rings, that puts me at 2.67 inches. Okay? 1/4 inch higher. When you run that data on that ballistics program, Watch what happens between 20 and 45 yards. Look at the disparity, no matter how you zero the gun. Elevated shots, when you start adding in some elevation of, say, 25 to 40 degrees, look at the span of the point of impact in tenths of inches. And then lower the mount back to 2.42, or if you're using a 1-inch tube scope and you can get that scope height down lower to say 1.5 or 1.75, watch what happens. Watch what happens when you do your 35 or 40 yard zero. Watch what happens to those ranges between, say, 15 to 17 out to 40. Look how it tightens up for your point of impact. So you can see, look, you don't have every squirrel in the woods. What I'm saying, every squirrel in the woods, it's not going to give you a chance to laser him. Okay? So for a point and shoot application, a high mount on a gun, even a 22 long rifle, 17 HMR, 17 HM2, is a bad idea. And you'll see that if you look at that app. You start getting into half-inch differences there pretty quick. 0.3. You see what I'm saying? Now, those guys out there, a lot of these guys that shoot these paper targets and, they're shooting off of benches, well, the high mount there at fixed distance and farther distance, it's not a problem. It's not a problem. But when you start getting into closer quarters, shooting game animals between generally 15 to 45 yards, it becomes a problem. And 2 3/10 of an inch. Now remember, that's assuming you're putting a perfect shot. 2 3/10 of an inch. Don't forget, there's bullet error, gun error, and shooter error. So that 3/10 of an inch on paper could turn into be 5/10, 6/10. And on a squirrel head, that could be the difference between grazing a head, missing a head, or making a good shot. Okay? I just thought I would share this. That's the reason you've always heard me make reference to, I like low-mounted scopes. Well, I can't really go any lower on this FX Maverick. And use it because of the way it's set up. I'm about as low as I can go and get behind the scope. See, my 17 HM, now remember, a 50 millimeter objective lens is going to drive your scope height to a degree on like rimfire. Well, they can on some air rifle. I don't have every model air rifle. Okay. But truth be told, when you start getting anything 2.25 inches and higher, it's going to cause some problems. But there's fewer problems there than if you go to 2.67. Start getting that high above it, you got some problems. So I probably will not put these other mounts on this gun for that reason. Hunting leaves on squirrels, it could cause big trouble. It's still not as pleasant to use for calculation's sake, point of impact sake, point and shoot at closer distances than say my 17 HM2 that's got a scope height down on it about 1.7, 1.75, and I'm close to the barrel on that little barrel. Anyway, that's going to conclude the video. Everybody be safe out there and enjoy your day.